All right, this is Geek Talk. I need to put my spectacles on. Right, let's do this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi guys, and welcome to Geek Talk, where we talk deep and geek about pianos, keyboards, synthesizers, and music production. And my special guest today is someone I've known for a long time. We go back a long way. I've worked with him. He's recorded my vocals and he's done mastering for me. And he's become a good friend. I'm very happy to introduce you to the musician, the composer, the multi-instrumentalist, and my mastering engineer, Mr. Andy Marlow. Andy, how are you, mate?
Hi there. I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Very good. I see you're all set up there in your secret location.
Yes, indeed. Hidden away in Brixton, somewhere in Brixton.
He's given it away somewhere in Brixton. Okay, so we know that now. So yeah, Andy, it's been a while since I saw you. I think the last time I saw you must have been over a year ago when we were recording vocals. But obviously you've done some mastering for me since there. Tell me how you've been dealing with the lockdown.
The lockdown's been pretty hard with the commercial premises and that being shut for a while. So that has been, it's quite hard to keep going with the studio stuff, and certainly the live stuff I do with Jadis and Sons of the Tundra. That's obviously out the window. So it's just beginning to sort of pick up again now, I think, as everyone else gets over the craziness of this year.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how at the end of the year they've conveniently found a vaccine, but I'm happy about that. If anything that can bring us back to normal life is great. Right. So yeah. I obviously, Andy, let's just for the guys here and the viewers, I just want to sort of talk about a little bit about you. Obviously, you're a multi-instrumentalist, you're a bassist, a guitarist, and a producer, and you've done quite a few TV music for TV shows. And I think Tracy Ullman is a particularly big one you've done.
Yeah, Tracy, we started in, I think it was 2015, and we did 3 series over 3 years. And I was working with Tracy and a writer called Richard Thomas. And they would come up with the bare bones of a song, the chords and the funny lyrics and things, and then give it to me, and I would have to turn it into whatever style of music they wanted. So I had to source different drummers, get pianists in, because I can play a bit of piano, but not not to the level that was needed. And that was 9 months work a year for 18 minutes worth of music on the actual TV in the end. Some songs might have been done 50 or 60 times, redone 50 or 60 times. So I mean, it was a great laugh and amazing working with people that are that sharp and on the ball. It certainly ups my game an awful lot. And just learning the pressures of TV. Yeah, as well, and just deadlines and things which are much more severe than I've ever had in music.
Yeah, and of course with TV and stuff, there are so many moving parts. So because there's so many people that it needs to go through, someone can at the last minute they can change their mind and then just throw it back at you, and you've got to sort it in. Like I know you've worked through you've done many a nights without sleep.
Yeah, it was long hours, lots of 20-hour days during the last bits of it. There was one song where the song was about, I can't remember which song it was, but the subject, it was about something had changed, and Tracy was in New York, and we needed to change one line in the song, and it was filming the next day. So she recorded it on her iPhone, emailed it to me, and then I had to match her recording of her in her kitchen with the proper recordings done at my studio for filming the next day. Yeah. So things like that certainly they stress you out, but they're a great challenge. And once you know your gear, the equipment you've got, it's a lot easier to be able to deal with things like that, because at least you've got a stable base of what you know.
Absolutely, and we're certainly going to get onto gear. But before we do that, I must say, Tracy Ullman has been going for years. I remember seeing her first. This must have been in about 1987. Tracy Ullman to me is one of those comedians that is she's actually funny and she's actually talented, unlike a lot of comedians these days that I'm just like, I don't get you. But I remember when I remember seeing The Simpsons, you know, Bart and Homer, The Simpsons. I believe that was viewed, it was aired on her, the Tracy Ullman show in about 1987, 89. The Simpsons were like short little spots that came on the Tracy Ullman show. And then, of course, The Simpsons became a TV show in its own right. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they approached her, I think, on her show, which I think she got an Emmy for that show, one of 2 or 3 that she's had out in the States. And so for them, it was a big break for The Simpsons going on to Tracy's show. I was just so glad to be able to work with someone who's such a bundle of energy and enthusiasm and just endless inventiveness. It's tiring, but it's brilliant.
I can imagine it. Well, listen, Andy, as I say, at the end of this show, I want to talk a little bit about, because you do session work with a band called Jadis.
Jadis, yeah.
Jadis. Oh, God, Jadis, not Jadis. That's Jadis. And you've also part of a band called Sons of Tundra.
Sons of the Tundra.
Sons of the Tundra, okay. As I say, we'll talk about that at the end, and I will provide links in the description below for any of you guys to go and check out Andy's work. So, talking about Andy's work, I want to talk about a little bit of gear and geeky stuff, and interchangeably talk about what you and I are doing together, Andy. Now, guys, to you watching here, Andy is the guy I use for all my mastering. Now, I don't want to bore you with this, but I'm quite obsessive about what I do, like I'm sure most artists are. And I remember there were times when I would finish a song and I would send it to 4 different mastering engineers, and it would cost me a bloody fortune. And I shake my head in horror as to why I did that. And I remember sending it to Andy, and I sent it to, and I'm not going to mention the names, but I sent it to 3 other top mastering houses. And I'm not going to mention their names because remember, it's all subjective. But when the masters came back to me, I had masters A, B, C, and D. And then Andy's master instantly just was like, to me, it sounded right. You know, when something sounds right, you don't have to question it. It is right or it isn't. But Andy's master always sounded right. But then to make it fair, what I would do was, because I was very close to it, I would get in touch with fellow producers and also people who are just not producers, you know, people who don't have musical ears. And then I would let them do like a blindfold test, A, B, C, D, which sounds better. Now, a lot of people who aren't musicians couldn't really hear the difference because they're not really into that. However, producers and fellow producers, 90% of the time, or 99% of the time, Andy's masters always stood out head and shoulders above the others. Now, the reason I'm saying that, guys, is because, you know, the guys that I coach and mentor, I'm always on about the fact that it is not the gear. Of course, you've got to know how to use the gear, but if you look at Andy's setup there, you know, it's functional. I've been there. He's got a really good setup, but it is not a multi-million-pound platinum mastering suite. So the point I'm trying to make is, and I'm always trying to emphasize, is it is about working with a mastering engineer that understands your music and understands his gear. Because you must remember, when you send your music to be mastered by someone you don't know, it's a job and they want to get paid. Now, once again, I'm not here to slag off anyone. I'm just saying, for me personally, Andy has done enough mastering for me to know that he's the guy I always use. And he's not paid me to say this. Although, Andy, you can send me that tenner via PayPal afterwards. Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out the way, that Andy is the guy that I use for my mastering, and that, you know, it's not a multi-million-pound suite that he's using, but he's got the ears and he knows how to use his gear. So coming on to mastering, Andy, I want to ask a few questions because you've got great advice. And Andy indeed is one of my mentors, because to the people that I mentor and coach, Andy is indeed a mentor to me. Let's talk about mastering, Andy. You are one of the guys who really drums in the concept of dynamics and not mastering too hot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what does tend to happen, especially if you're mastering your own stuff, with certain plugins especially, that you can just crush the life out of everything, and it just reduces everything about the song that's so important and makes it musical. And dynamics is one of those things that, you know, you can't have loud without having quiet.
Yeah.
So if everything's squashed to the same level, or so the acoustic guitar intro at the start is louder than when the drums come in, to me that's just dynamically wrong.
Yes.
It's you have to listen to the track and actually be sympathetic to what it's doing, while obviously trying to make it fit into the pigeonholes of Spotify or Apple or CD mastering. But I don't believe you have to crush it to bits, because all you're doing is undoing the work that the mix engineer and the artist in the first place is trying to get over, which is emotion. You crush the dynamics and you can crush a lot of the emotion out of a song.
Yeah, that brings me nicely into the next thing. I think, Andy, it was what I always say to the guys on the channel here. Every time you hear timeless wisdom, it's always very obvious when you think of it, because most timeless wisdom is very obvious. And some very obvious wisdom that you said to me once was, Vaughn, if it's not loud enough, just turn the volume up.
Yeah. I mean, that's what your hands are for. And I just can't understand not getting it right for yourself. You know, why impede yourself by having it too quiet and trying to make it loud by using plugins to do that, when you can just lean over and turn it up?
That is absolutely right. And I do know that, the loudness wars, this is in the sort of the peak, was sort of like, I would say 2002 up until about 2008, that period was where they really went overboard. And some great records were just, in my opinion, destroyed by over limiting and everything. But fortunately, that's kind of gone out the window now, because with streaming services, essentially what they'll do is they will take your music at whatever level and they will make it fit in. But now this raises... They'll pigeonhole it. But this, of course, raises a lot of issues, because I know the various streaming sites will ask for a song to be mastered at a certain volume. And don't take these as ballpark, but I think iTunes asks for -12 LUFS, and then Spotify asks for maybe -16. And the
-14
is -14. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because I know there are these different ballparks you need to aim for, which, in the words of Andrew Sheps, the great mix engineer, is he doesn't even concern himself with that. But the question I've got to you is, Andy, whenever you master my stuff and stuff that you've mastered for clients of mine, you always aim for -13 LUFS, which is an unusual target. And can you explain why you do that?
Well, the reason I've been doing, I mean, I have changed that slightly now, but the reason I tended to aim for that was that it was close enough to a variety of platforms. And so if it did do something to the music to turn it up or down, it would be doing it by a small amount.
Oh, right.
If it was mastered very loud, all of them would be turning it down. If you master it to -3 or 6 or something, you'd be turning it down by 6 dB, or their processors will. And you don't know what their processors are going to do to your track and how they're quite going to do it. It may just chop the tops off, in which case it'll distort it and it'll degrade the sound quality. So I sort of tried to aim for that. And on a CD, it made it loud enough still, not as loud as a lot of commercial stuff, but again, you can turn the volume up.
Yes. No, this is interesting. There's a website called Meter Plugs, and the guy who runs that is a guy called Ian Shepherd. He's doing some great plugins and stuff. And you guys, I'll put a link in the description below. This is not a product endorsement. It's just me talking about stuff that really works. I think it's called loudnesspenalty.com. And then what that is, it's you go to this website, and when you've finished mastering your track, you can drop it into this link. And what it does is it'll analyze your song and it will send it back to you, and it will tell you how loud your song is within the certain ballparks. So for instance, if it's too soft for Spotify, it'll say, you know, Spotify plus 2 dB, meaning you should bring it up by 2 dB. Anyway, every streaming site has their own ballpark and request. But now this is where we get into murky waters here, is because, as Andy has said, you as the artist have spent so much money and time on that piece of artwork. You've used a good mastering engineer, someone like Andy, who's got your music to sound great. And now you send it to a streaming platform and they'll just be like, oh, it's too loud, and they'll just chop the top off. So this is the thing, is you never know what processing they're going to use. So Andy, the question is, do you think it is better to submit the song slightly too loud or slightly too soft?
I would probably err on the slightly too soft, because turning something up, I think, is most likely to be less destructive than severe limiting from something that's too loud, and it may just be turned down, but it may also be limited. And another layer of limiting is another layer of distortion and possible degradation in the sound. Turning up, you may get a little bit more noise or something, but I think overall that's less obtrusive than having it limited severely. Yeah, so I'd urge on that. I mean, what I'd say with me saying to turn things up, I always master at exactly the same volume,
right,
so that it's consistent, and I know what I'm hearing, and I know if the bass end is right or if the treble is getting too harsh, because that's the volume that I know at. If you listen to it too quiet or louder than that, or keep changing, you don't ever have a solid bass line.
That's right.
To make your judgments on.
That's right. Yes.
Listening back, turn it up if you like. You know, if you want it loud, turn it up. That's it.
Yeah, I see this all the time, and this is particularly something that, you know, people who are just getting into music production fall prey to. They go online, they read a lot of forums, they watch a lot of tutorial videos, and then very often I've had with, you know, people that I'm coaching or friends that I'm helping, they will send a song to me, or they'll be with me, and I'll be like, what does it sound like to you? And they're like, Vaughn, it sounds good. I'm like, okay, it sounds good to me too. What's the problem? They're like, oh, the meter's clipping in the red. So this is the thing, is it's the curse of modern technology, is the fact that we are mixing with our eyes and not with our ears.
You know, yeah, I think that's you know, it's not the way to move forward.
when
something goes red, it means that something's very wrong.
Yes. I mean, when I got into music production, making records sort of in the mid-90s, I did my first record using a MC50 Mark II micro composer, which is just, it's got a little display that size. And so you had no other option but you were forced to listen, because there was nothing to look at. And a lot of, I don't know if I'm right in saying this, but a lot of music I hear these days from students and people starting out, when you listen to it, I'm saying to myself, I can hear you've made this staring at a screen. I don't know. You just listen to it and it just sounds like a guy sitting behind a door. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, some of the sort of, I think also is when you're recording, that sometimes if you're looking at the screen as well as trying to play something for timing or cues or whatever, there's something that you get sucked into the grid and what's happening on there, rather than being in the moment and playing the instrument. And the same thing can happen when you're mixing and listening. I turn the screen off a lot.
Yes.
To make sure that I can't see actually anything. And I listen to the whole thing, because you can go into little pockets of it and sort out little bits and pieces, but nobody else is going to listen to it like that.
Yes.
They'll listen to it from start to finish. So you have to listen to the whole thing to see where it's going. Where do the dynamics, does it drop enough? Is that too bright, too dark? You know, it's the flow of the piece, the emotion of the piece.
That's right.
And turning off the screen can help you connect with that, because you're then using these again.
I think that's why I've had success with the masters you've done for me, Andy, is because you understand where I'm coming from. and you know what I'm trying to achieve. And I always say that this is very important to establish a relationship with a mastering engineer, because, you know, technology has made it accessible to the fact that people can master their own music. Now, I personally do not endorse that. As far as mastering goes, I understand it. You know, I've mastered some of my own music before. I've mastered stuff for other people, but I am still, and call me old-fashioned, I am still a great advocate of the old school of thought that you mix it and you surrender it to a good mastering engineer.
Yeah. I mean, the stuff that I mix for albums, so like Sons of the Tundra, we get someone else to master it because I've mixed it.
Yeah.
And obviously I could master it, but it's that fresh set of ears, just giving your work a check over for the real world.
Yeah.
And that's very important, because even if you don't listen to it for 3 months and then you master it, you're still connected to it in a way that you know the nuts and bolts of it. Whereas everyone else will see the shiny car and won't see the little screw that holds the dashboard on.
Correct.
But if you've mixed it, you know what about that screw, and that screw might have really annoyed you during the mix.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's important to split things up.
That is absolutely true. And I'm just thinking of, you know, with mastering becoming quite a lucrative and, you know, quite a big industry, you know, as it's always been, but it's certainly become a more, you know, everyone's having a go at it kind of thing. And this is the problem, is where a lot of people will just buy a mastering piece of software and they will say, I will master your track for you for, you know, for $10. And anyway, you know, in Sod's Law, you might be very lucky, but that, in my experience, that's not the case. But also, I've also found, Andy, that a lot of these there's some very big names out there. Once again, I'm not going to mention it, who will names drop, and they will say, we have mastered, you know, and they will names drop some of the big artists that they've mastered. And then what I find the novices fall prey to this, because they're, you know, they've just done their record and they'll spend stupid money to get it mastered by one of these big, and what the problem is we say you cannot polish a turd. I mean, I will always say that what was the saying? Record like you're mixing.
Oh, it's frozen.
Yeah, well, you record as if though you're mixing, and mix as if though you're mastering. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, it's it went a bit digital there. Sorry, so I missed a little bit of that.
Okay, yeah, cut my monologue. All I'm saying is basically is I still think look, every process is important, but I still feel that the mixing process is the most important thing. And that is why I think a lot of these big companies are, you know, encouraging people to spend a lot of money, whereas your focus should be on creating a good mix.
Yeah. I mean, you can improve something with mastering, but you'll never make a great sounding song unless the mix is there. And it's like when I work with you, and you send a pre-master over to me, I will have a listen through to it and flag up any issues I can see that would force me to do more processing to get it to work. And then if you take it back and sort out those little niggles, or that's, you know, there's too much at 250 hertz, or, you know, there's a bit of a build up here, or that's a bit lacking. If you can sort out that, I can do less to it, which means it's more like your mix.
Correct. And
which is what I want to do, you know.
This is something I just want to actually highlight there, Andy. You've brought up a very important fact here. And guys, I know this, and this is because of my relationship with Andy, is when I send him a song, he knows what I'm going for. It's very seldom when I send him a song that he'll just master it. He will always come back with a checklist, and he'll be like, he'll be, Vaughn, I think the snare's a little bit loud, or was that a creative decision? And then he'll say, it seems to be a little bit lacking in the 200 range. I think I had a problem with that because of my room, but I mean, I've got a new room here, and SonarWorks is doing a great job for that. The point I'm trying to say is, guys, is that Andy will point out things that could be improved before he masters it. Thereby, Andy, as every good mastering engineer understands, is that the less you do in mastering, the best. However, a lot of I'm not going to mention this, but some big names that I've worked with, you'll send it to them and they'll just send it straight back. because you know something, to them it's mortgage money. They need to pay their bills, and they don't care about you as an artist. So, and this is why, you know, obviously Andy and I have got our mates rates, which I'm not at liberty to disclose to you guys, but he has done work for me on the mastering that I've just sometimes felt like I've cheated him. You know, it's just like, because the level of attention to detail is like, no, Vaughn, you need to change this. And I'm like, oh my God, do you just want to mix it, dude? But at the end of the day, I feel that, Andy, I feel you care about my music, and you are only going to master it when you know I've taken it to the point that I can, you know, that it's as good as I can get it before you master it.
Yeah, I mean, you're as good as your last master in a way.
Yeah.
In terms of things, and I want anything I do musically to be the best I can do it, and if that means helping you with some pointers to get it to the point where I can then do what I need to do to make it how I feel it should be, that's the game. It's not just, here's the file, whack it through some stuff. Oh yeah, it's fine for Spotify, that'll do. That's not good enough. You have to put some care and attention and emotion into even the mastering. You have to give a damn, you know.
This is something I want to just mention this to the community, guys. I was sitting with Andy once while he was mastering one of my songs. I went to his studio in Brixton. There we were sitting together, and something I noticed that Andy did that was very time consuming, but it shows attention to detail. It's something I've never really seen before. Is that while I was sitting with Andy there, he obviously, when I got to the studio, he had loaded the song in, and he'd kind of, you know, he'd set things up and everything. But he listens to the song all the way through. And then if he hears something wrong, he starts it at the beginning again. And not always, but what I'm trying to point out is, when you found something problematic in the song, you weren't sort of just listening to this, you're basically listening to the whole song or large sections of the song. And when I said to Andy, I said, why are you doing that? And your answer was something along the lines of, if you just focus in on that little part, you lose perspective of the whole song. And that was mind-blowing to me, because it's just like, so this is why I think Andy takes his time with the mastering, because you're listening to the whole song. So when you make a change here, you need to know that the change at 3 minutes 20, how is that going to fit in the context of the mix, you know, from the beginning of the song? Am I making sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's you can't just go to the loudest point in the song, think, okay, I need to squash that down to get within my limits, and just go, that's fine. You need to hear what happens at that point after the 3 minutes before that.
Yes.
Has it crushed it too much? In which case the whole thing needs to come down. And then you need to listen from the start again. Is the start now too quiet?
Yeah.
You know, but it's all relative throughout the whole piece. You are mastering, after all, a piece of music, not a chorus or a verse or that bridge that you could never quite get right. You know, that isn't the mastering isn't to sort that out. It's to try and get that whole piece of music out to the world so that it will work in as many places as possible and carry the emotion.
That's right. And I think there's always a trade-off, because I think there is no such thing as the ideal song that's going to translate 100% on every playback system.
No, I mean, that'll never happen, but you're trying to go for the sort of, it works as best as possible on as many systems as possible. And that's partly with knowing your speakers or knowing your room. You know, if you do something here and it sounds like that in your room, what it will sound like. I know what it's going to sound like in my car or on my phone. But when I'm mastering things, I also check on my phone or send it through to little speakers, and, you know, can you hear the kick?
Yeah.
If that's integral to the song and you can't hear it on an iPhone speaker, which half the people listen to nowadays, that's not working. You know, it needs to, but then putting it back onto a big system, it can't be, it's a kick with a song attached to it. The elements have to all sort of work in there on all these different systems.
Yes. Something I remember as well, when we were mastering that track together, I remember you standing up and going, because Andy's studio, how big is your studio? It's about, it's 3 meters by...
3.5 meters by 2 for the main room,
and
plus a booth and a little corridor.
And I just want to say, when you go to Andy's studio, it's kind of like, you feel like you're in a recording studio. It's not in, it's not in someone's bedroom, no disrespect, but it's like, you're in Brixton, you're going downstairs into like this, this facility, and it's like, you'll feel like, yeah, man, I'm in a studio. And it's got that real sort of like rock and roll feel to it. And he's got a really tasty vocal booth there, which you spent a lot of money on. When we were mastering, Andy went and stood outside the door there because he is so familiar with that room. And you use that as like a bass test. Remember, you would stand outside. Yes. And that's how you gauge your bass, because you know the room so well.
Yeah. I mean, it's if I go back there and I hear what it's doing to the air out there, I sort of have a very good idea what it sounded like on much bigger speakers with a lot more bottom end on them. I mean, it's partly, it was just the luck of the design of the room, but you can tell if it's overcooked. That's for sure.
Yes. And I think this goes into the importance of knowing your gear and knowing your room.
And it's an ear training as well. Actually listening to stuff, noticing that when you walk from one room in your house into another, that the acoustics have changed. Yeah. Because the fabrics have changed. The rooms are different size. Going outside, walking under a tunnel, going into the tube, on a bus. I listen to this stuff. It's very geeky, but I listen to all this stuff all the time and take note of it. And I've done some talks at schools where I got 400 or 500 children to all clap at the same time in the thing, to listen to the echo in the room. And speaking to parents for the couple of weeks afterwards, when I bumped into them, they said, "Did you do a talk on acoustics?" Because my son has come back home and he's now going around the house clapping in different rooms, listening to the different acoustics. I just think it's brilliant to, that's knowledge. Yeah. But you can use that, you need to use that in your mastering as well.
I think that's very true, Andy. I think it's like also, I think when you're creating a mix, you're basically creating an artificial sounds, or you're using artificial or technology or to make the listener feel like they're in a natural space. So, and this is something I've always said to people when if they'll send me something that sounds too echoey or they're struggling with the reverb and the delay, I always tell them to, go out the studio and turn on the tap and listen to the water drip. You really need to be aware. And it is straight. I know it sounds geeky, but you know what I mean. It's all about understanding that what we're recreating in records is just really trying to reproduce what we hear naturally in the environment.
Yeah, or it could be a false thing as well, but you're creating an aural world.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things I do when I'm checking masters, if I'm at home, is I put it on a system and then I walk around the house.
Yes.
And so you hear it coming through 2 different doors into a different room. What carries through, what disappears, what sounds good, what doesn't sound good. And I sort of make notes. And as I get more notes, if it's a tricky master particularly, and there's more to do, the notes cross each other off as I work through different systems to listen to and different environments to hear it in. Going outside and putting it on headphones to get you completely out of the studio, I think for mixing as well is something I've done for 30 years now. I put the mix on my phone, go out with some headphones, and I go outside to completely distance yourself from the entire mixing environment or mastering.
Yeah.
And you think differently.
Yeah.
And you do secondary listening because you're still aware of where you are in a car park or by a road or something. So the listening becomes slightly secondary, but you still pick up on stuff.
You see, this is why at the end, as I say, I've really got no, as I say, qualms about endorsing Andy Marlow to do. He doesn't only do mastering, he does all kinds of things, but as a mastering engineer, as I say, I've never had someone who, before he masters it, he comes back with it's almost like a consultation, like bang, 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 this, and then I'm like, wow, this is good customer services. So this is really something. It was the first, when you mastered my music for the first time, it was like, I felt like, oh my God, this is someone who actually cares about the music they're mastering?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine not caring about some music I was doing. I've done music since I was 3.5 or 4 when I started piano. So, and my dad was a classical musician, so I was in recording sessions with choirs and organs and orchestras from when I was born. So I've had some great ear training and things. But his learning from him was that it's all about the passion for it. Yes. And if you don't give a damn about a piece of music, yes, you can master it to a certain extent, but I don't ever believe it will be as good as if you care about it, and that you want it to come out of your studio sounding as good as you can possibly get it. And if that means sending it back to the mixer and going, not good enough, so be it.
Andy, I think we'll have to work on your branding there. We'll have to call it Andy Marlow, Mastering with Heart, or something like that. Because with you, it's not technical. It's kind of like, it's like the last record I did, which was My Angel, which was mixed by Sean Kennedy, did a great job. When Sean listened back to obviously Sean mixed it. I sat with him, we mixed it, and then we sent it to you to master. And then I sent the master back to Sean to listen to, and Sean said, "Okay, I'm gonna take a break from it for a week, because he'd been too close to it." And then a week later, I got this text, and Sean said something like, "Dude, this is like." I don't know what Sean was smoking. He just said that the sort of like the 3D spatial stuff you'd done. It's like you'd made it very wide, but without pulling it apart, because sometimes you can make it. Anyway, I think the guys here get that I am absolutely thrilled by the service and the quality of work I get from you. And I will absolutely be using you. And I swear by this guys. Andy Marlow, the Mastering Engineer. Okay, so this brings us on to nicely now. Let's talk about what we're doing at the moment, Andy. I've got my Vaughty project, which is very staggered because of my YouTube channel. I've been trying to get music out for ages, but I've told the guys I'm working on an album called The Yearning. It's a 12-track album. And I just want to explain to the guys in the community here how we're working. Now, I've decided to mix this record myself because I just feel that when I'm mixing it myself, I've got more control over the sound and everything. As I say, using a mix engineer is sometimes a luxury, but I think I'm capable of mixing my own stuff. And it's just that, I don't mean that arrogantly, it's just that I want to have the control. So the way Andy and I are going to do this now, and this is a very good way, Andy's going to master it, but he's kind of, I don't know what you would call this subject, what you would call this process is I will work on the songs and take them to a level that I can do no more. Like that is the most I can do. And then what I will do is I will bounce everything within the session, but there will still be some plugins on the session. I work in Logic. I will then send the Logic session to Andy. Andy will then open the Logic session, and what he will have of 8 different colors. So it's essentially like I'm sending him the stems, but he will have access to the separate parts. And then he will, and because I've got a mix chain now, it's important. My mix chain is my mix chain, and it's important that Andy and I have the same plugins. So when he opens the session, he will have my program, my mix chain, and everything. But here's the thing: he can take it a step further. Like because he's got separate, he will have my whole sound, but because he's got separate control, he might just think, oh, that snare needs a little bit of grit, or that hi-hat needs to, he can just ever so slightly tweak it, but the sound will fundamentally be there, and then he can sort of stem master it. I think I've explained that well, Andy.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, it just means that if I bring everything up at Unity, your eight stems, drums, bass, guitars, keyboards, vocals, whatever, and with your chain, your mastering chain, and whatever's going on those stems, I've got exactly what you had.
Yeah.
But when I listen to it, rather than me coming back to you and going, can you turn that snare down by 0.5 dB or darken that piano a little or something, I've got the control to be able to do a bit of a tweak while retaining the sound that you want.
Yes.
And it just means I can decongest some bits if the synths are getting a bit muddy, I can just do a little bit of stuff which doesn't wreck the sound that you're after, but it means you don't have to go back for a remix. It can be sort of part of it. So it's a sort of a final polish mix, and then mastering that. Or if you don't want to look at it this way, I'm mastering it, but with the choice to just get rid of any little niggles, any little problems in it.
You have always been very good at summing things up in one sentence, because I can get very verbose sometimes. Now that's absolutely right. It's just having that, and this is the thing is, Andy, I've also found is when working with a mix engineer, very often you work with a mix engineer because you like their sound and their creativity, but because of the way I work and a lot of people work is, you're building a sound as you go. And then just to send the stems to someone to mix or from scratch, it's going to change the sound. That is why the way we work is you're essentially getting it exactly the way I wanted. And you're going, okay, Vaughn, you're at 90%. I'm going to add the extra 10%.
Yeah.
And that's where we are.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you sent me a stereo file of the mix, but it's just split up into 8. And it means I can go backwards slightly, not fully, but slightly, just to smooth things in, fill in little holes. If there's a little gap, I can do something to one of the tracks rather than having to do it to all of the tracks. If there's a little hole around 250 hertz or something and it's a bit thin, if I do it to all of that, the snare's going to come up, the bottom of the toms, it'll muddy the kick. But if I can do it just to the keyboard, maybe if that was the issue, it's a lot more transparent. So again, I'm doing less to it.
Yes.
Which is, I'm not saying that, I try and do the least to do to a song as a sort of, I always do the least. It's, you do what's necessary for it. But I don't believe piling in plug-in after plug-in. Why use 3 to get something done if one does it well?
Yes, correct. That's absolutely right. And I think this is something I see something is definitely a real novice mistake. It's something I've learned the hard way over the many years, is that you add something and you get the shiny noise of, I've just bought this plugin, so I've got to justify it and put it on. Whereas I think you've always taught me is ask yourself why you're putting it on.
Yeah. I mean, you got to, sometimes in the heat of the moment, in the excitement of mixing, I do chuck the kitchen sink at things sometimes and mult or split tracks up and just chuck entire new plug-in chains on them to see what's happening. But when I've actually got to the point where that's what I want, I then have a look at the chain again of plugins, and I might see that I've got 3 EQs doing stuff. I then go back and, well, actually, can I get away with 1 EQ and then picking the right EQ, like a Neve or an API to do its particular job, but can I get away with 1 to achieve that effect? Because then you're not going through all the different gain stages and possibly screwing up the, further down. Some plugins don't like to be too hot. They instantly distort. So the less that's going on, again, sometimes the less is more.
That's right. Well, I think, Andy, something you've taught me well is when I was looking at your sessions, how low your gains are. You seem to really pay particular attention to gain staging. And I really think maybe, time permitting, we'll talk about maybe you on the community are doing some kind of masterclass about gain staging, because I think that is a very, it's one of those things, it's not complicated. And it's something people get really obsessed about. Now, it's both important, but not that important, but it's one of those things, of course it's important, but people can get really bogged down. And I think you've got some really specialized knowledge there that I think the community I would love to hear about.
Yeah. I mean, it's I record things low enough so that I never have to worry about that it's ever going to clip. And with a digital system, you've got such a lot of headroom nowadays. In the old days of tape, you had to record towards the red line, as it were, to make sure that your recording was louder than the hiss of the tape and the machine and whatever else was going on. Now we've got this incredible headroom with digital recording. There's no need for it. And I certainly find with Logic, if you've got 20 tracks and everything's up near 0, by the time you get to a bus or to the final output, you've got to do something to turn it all down, in which case that's just wrong. Get it right on the way in, and then I don't have to look at the meters particularly. It's just does it sound too loud? If it sounds too loud, it is too loud. So it's sort of, you can use meters, but I find if you're using meters all the time because you're worried you're clipping, get it right earlier down the chain, or even when you record it.
Yeah.
Just record it quieter. Give yourself a chance. You can always turn stuff up. You can't get back from a clip's horrible recording.
Definitely something we'll talk about, Andy. As I say, I hate to assume how my content is going to be received when it goes out, but I can tell you now that this chat now, I can just see the geeks that I know are going to love this, so, and they're going to request you back again. So, and just coming back to our project where you're mixing my album for me. This is going to be a little bit of a Christmas gift for Andy, because obviously I need to ensure that Andy has all the plugins I have. Now, we do have a lot of the same plugins, but this does mean that anything that he doesn't have that is integral to my sound, I'm going to have to buy and send to him as a gift. So that's why I'm waiting for Black Friday, Andy.
Yeah,
a whole lot of plugins now.
yeah. Wait till Waves hits that day. So.
Waves. But we don't want to talk too much about gear and stuff. But can you just tell the guys here a bit of your favorite go-to plugins or hardware or anything at the moment?
I mean, I use the UAD Apollo rack twin and a satellite with Thunderbolt, and since I've changed to that, it's brought back a lot of fun to me, because I've found particularly with the UAD plugins, it feels like you're using a proper unit. Obviously, there's no hands-on control of it; it's on a GUI. But when you turn, like on an Eve EQ, you turn the mid up, something starts happening straight away, and it feels to me natural. And so I'm a big fan of that, because it makes me feel comfortable with it. I'm not dialing in 12 dB of gain on a Logic EQ and going, I can't really hear what it's doing properly. Yeah. So it's picking the right EQ, the right compressor. I mean, I absolutely love the Shadow Hills mastering compressor on UAD. That's a pretty much go-to, and the Pultec EQ. Sometimes not even really doing anything. It's just going through the model transformers, and it just adds a certain weight, and it just sounds better going through it. There's some plugins that just do that, where you don't even twiddle the knobs.
Yeah, I know one of my, we're not going to give our secrets away, Andy. Yeah, you got to give people tips, but you can't give them your secret. Yeah. But one of my things, I think something I've done, and I know it's something you do as well, is on my master bus, I will often have a Pultec EQ, which is it the PEQ one?
The Pultec Pro, the one with all.
That's right. And I will very often have that somewhere on the chain. I won't say where, but it's not actually doing anything.
Yeah.
Just because it gives it a sound, and that's
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of when mastering, sometimes I'll put the track back through a different preamp sometimes to see if that adds the sort of sound and the flavor to it that you might struggle if you're just EQing and compressing. Sometimes just going through an Eve or a API or something like that can nudge it into that special sweet spot where you go, that's sounding nice. And so it's sort of testing things out.
Andy, there's a lot I can ask you, but this is something that you have so many nuggets of wisdom, and you've got really sort of unusual ways of doing things sometimes in a good way, or you often do things that are quite unconventional. For instance, one time when I went into your vocal booth, I was recording my vocals there, and you recorded the vocals. You've got a UA87, but you also had was it a Beta 58 at the same time?
Yeah, SM58.
An SM58, and I'll let you explain this, guys. But it was really, that just meant I was singing to two mics at the same time. You've got the U87 from Neumann, which is obviously a premier mic, and then you've got the SM58, which is like a standard rock and roll kind of mic. And then Andy would show how you'd blend those two signals together. Is that right?
Yeah, it's sort of, rather than just having one recording and one sound. For example, from the U87, which is, it's beautifully crisp, it's deep, it's a 2 and a bit grand microphone. It's a lovely piece of kit. Sometimes in mixdown, I've found you can add EQ to that, and you can add compression and effects, but it's still a U87 with its own sound. And I often like recording with 2 or 3 different mics, and each mic brings a different flavor, a slightly different sound, and blending them together can get you an easier result than an awful lot of work with one microphone and a lot of effects. Whereas just blending 2 and just bringing up the SM58, which is maybe a bit more middly, a bit more crunchy, can change that sound in a way that EQ alone and compression just cannot do. Plus, I found on very time-pressured recordings, particularly for television, having 2 or 3 mics and having one turned down quite a lot means that no matter what the artist does, you will get a recording of it. Good. Because sometimes they only record it once. And so having 2 or 3 is in that situation is a backup, and you can use it to change the tone. But sometimes it's just the pure, if they suddenly just start screaming because it's a comedy song, the U87 is just going to be flatlined, whereas one that's quieter, you've still got it.
That is great advice. So, because very often I've recorded singers before, and obviously, when you're setting them up, you get them to sing as loud as they're going to sing, and then they'll start. When you're testing, and then sometimes in the moment of the song, there's this amazing emotion, and they might clip it. And that's me being a bad mix recording engineer. But the bottom line is, by having a second mic that is substantially lower, you've got options.
Yeah. So you've got the tonal option, which I think is a fab thing to have. And because if they're right next to each other, there's no problem with phase. Yeah. If they're distant from each other, you're going to start having some phase issues, which you can deal with. But when they're right next to each other, I have them as close as possible behind the pop shield. There's no phase issue, and it's that safety thing. When we're recording, I get a singer to sing as loud as they can, then I turn it down a tiny bit because I know that they're going to do it.
I can see some masterclasses coming here soon. Really, it's going to be a lot of interest. Tell us also, you are you're fundamentally, you play many instruments, but you started with guitar, and in the band, you play bass. Is that right?
Yeah, I started off as a guitarist, and I dabbled with bass to be able to put bass lines down on old 4-track recordings and things like that. And after a while, I found, although I was doing quite a lot of guitar sessions, there's so many very, very good guitarists around.
Yeah.
There's lots of really great bass players as well, but I think there's less.
Yeah.
And I just found that I started getting more work as a bass player. And being a guitarist, you then swap to bass. You're very aware of all the chords, and having done music theory all my life as well, you're very aware of where you're playing rather than just root noting. And so it's sort of, for the last 20 years, it's nearly been 100% bass sessions. I still play guitar on my own stuff and for stuff I'm working on, but anything live and stuff, it's always bass.
I'm surprised by that, because I've obviously you're a multi-instrumentalist, and I've heard your work, but it's just that the bass obviously I've been to see you guys play live, and the bass, some of the bass I've heard in the records, they're very complex, difficult parts. You need really which is that song where you essentially need a hand twice the size to kind of do it. You're doing very complex stuff there. Yeah,
it's with Jadis, there's it's prog rock. It's complicated. Some of the older songs are 9 or 10 minutes in lots of different time signatures, and often the bass does not play the root notes at anything anyone else is playing. The keyboard player, me, and the guitarist will be playing completely different stuff, and between them you get a key to the piece, but each of us individually isn't actually necessarily playing in it. So it's pretty technical, but it's technique with emotion, because I wouldn't want to do it if it was just pure technique. That would bore the hell out of me. And I've been in that band for 15 years now. I'm still the new boy. So it's but I practice very hard for those gigs, because you actually have to be able to play very hard and very complicated stuff for 2 and a bit hours on stage every night.
Yeah. And also you do the mastering for those albums, is that right?
Yeah, because I don't mix it.
Yeah.
So I record my own bass parts. I help with recording bits and pieces of it, and I'll give a lot of advice to the singer who's mixing it about what he needs to change before I master. And then I mastered them, because I'm sufficiently distanced. So all I've done recording wise really is just the bass and backing vocals, and I can forget about the backing vocals very easily.
Well, I know obviously the members of my community are very varied. You're in the producers forum and on the Vaughn George Facebook group and the YouTube channel. But it's people are fundamentally really sort of like synthesizer, electronic music fans, not exclusively. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post links. Andy will liaise, and I will put links in the description. Some of the Tundra, some of the
Jadis.
I always say Jadis, some of the Jadis stuff. And also, guys, what I will do is I will put a link in the description of the last single I did, which was called My Angel. It was mixed by Sean Kennedy, and it was mastered by Andy Marlow. I will put descriptions in the link in the description below, so you can see, and then just go and listen. Listen to the definition and the complexity of the Tundra and the Jadis stuff, and then also just listen to just listen to it, and you will see.
I mean, if you put the Murmuration, the last Sons of the Tundra album, is one where you can really hear mixing definition taken to to quite a high, hopefully good level.
Well, you did spend a lot of time on that, didn't you? Probably too much time. I think you.
Well, that was off and on to nearly 3 years.
Yeah.
But the previous album was 10 years, so that was quite short in comparison.
Yeah. Oh, talking about the bands, are you hoping to do some gigs?
Well, Jadis were meant to be out this month. We were going to be doing some gigs in Europe and the UK, but obviously that's not happening. So our first gig that I think we have is we're doing a prog rock festival in what used to be Eastern Germany in June. And I think Steve Howe from Yes is playing on the other main stage when we're on. So, which is a shame, so I'd like to go and see him, but we're busy at the time. I'm looking forward to that. It's just a shame it's 7 months away.
What was the last gig I saw you guys at?
That was in London.
It was in London, yeah. It's very, the members of the band in this type of music are very what I call musical. It's very like musical, everyone can like really fucking play, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's good fun to be in a band where everyone can knows their chops.
Yeah.
And everyone's like bang up to standards and scratch.
Yeah, it's not.
It still means you have to practice a lot, but it's
correct. It's not sort of firing samples over a backing track. Anyway, welcome to my world.
No. It's but it's the joy of playing with other musicians. And the fact that they are really, really good. I mean, our keyboard player last year or the year before was voted 21st best rock keyboard player in Prog Mag.
Wow. Okay.
Which is pretty good going, because we're in a sort of, prog isn't the biggest genre of rock, but for him to be up there, and it's just amazing. Sometimes it's hard to play the bass because you're listening to them doing an amazing solo on stage, and you're just thinking, wow, I'm so lucky. I'm actually on stage with these people who can play like this.
Well, dude, you can hold your own. I'm so.
It's just trying not to get carried away with the wow, isn't that really cool, and you stop playing.
And then you forget your lines as well. Yeah.
So it's a lot of brain work. You can't drink before these gigs. That's for sure.
Actually, just sort of slightly digressing on topic here. I think you were last time saying that you guys just toured Europe, and you were telling me how different it is to tour in Germany because you are like really treated well. as opposed to touring in the UK?
Well, I mean, as soon as you go to Europe, the first place we normally play on a tour is a place called the Boerderij in Holland. And it's an amazing venue with an amazing crew. And as soon as you turn up, eight or 10 roadies come out, and all of your stuff is just whipped out of the van and it's on the stage. Someone shows you to your dressing room.
Wow.
Each band has its own dressing room and showers. There's food, meals, drinks. And someone will come up and get you when it's time for you to go on stage. It's a real no-brainer. It's just lovely. And then, 3 a.m. when you finished, they're still there chatting with you, helping you out. And I've played at festivals where you get Roskilde in Denmark, where you got a chalet for 6 hours, even though you're only playing for 40 minutes. Wow. But you've got a chalet with backstage eating and this and that. And then I played Glastonbury the next day one year, and there was 24 warm lagers sitting in a small sort of pop-up tent with nothing else. That was it. There was just 24 warm lagers, no water even.
Welcome to Britain.
Yeah, it was. So we love touring in Europe. It's just sort of set up better, and more people seem to get into it there as well. People will travel rounds and come to every single show on our tour. 6 or 7 shows, Germany, Holland, France, Belgium, wherever. And so we've got a very dedicated fan base, which is lovely.
Oh, that's great. Well, as I say, I will put links in the description below to that. And Andy, I think we're going to cap it here because we've gone over an hour. But I'm sure I can promise you, if we spoke for 3 hours, we've got geeks on this channel that'll follow it. But I definitely just wanted to use this introductory video to you, just to introduce you to the group and to the channel. Yep. And to show everyone who I'm working with, this is my go-to mastering engineer. And of course, we're also going to talk on the record. I'm going to need some live bass and guitar. Yeah. Because I've just finished. I've just finished the track. I've just laid the guitars down onto my track, Sleeping Dogs, and I'm going to lay down the vocals. And you'll have that soon. But there are other songs that I'm going to want. I'm going to want to put some live bass on or something. So. Yeah. I think we'll do videos and behind the scenes stuff, guys.
Yeah,
if coronavirus allows it. And I also want to just say, if there is anyone in the community out here who is looking for, look, I don't have to say great mastering. All I need to say is I use Andy. So, yeah. If you want great mastering at reasonable rates at someone who really cares, then do get in touch with Andy Marlow.
So it's mastering with pre-feedback.
Yes, mastering with pre-feedback, mastering with heart. That's what I'm going to call it. We will put contact details in the description below. And Andy he's promised he will join the Vaughn George Facebook group, so you guys can just reach out to him there.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Andy, my friend, is there anything else you'd like to say? Any closing notes?
No, that was a great chat. It's great fun. And
well, great fun.
Yeah, it's nice to be back in the studios and doing stuff.
Yeah, you look like a kid in a sweet shop there, man.
Yeah, no, it's listening to a mix today on the speakers at top volume today was great fun. Some new Tundra stuff, and it was exciting.
Well, keep us up to date with what's happening. I've got a very engaging community here, and I think you're going to fit in just perfectly. One more thing I was going to say. Oh yes, I was going to say we've got our lockdown in the UK ending here on the 2nd of December.
Yeah,
and I don't know if we're going to go back into a tier system, but I do hope that means that we can possibly meet up or have a beer or something.
That would be great. That'd be fantastic.
All right, Andy. Thank you so much. I will see you soon.
Yes, see you soon. Cheers, Ed.
Adios.
Bye.